do it.
Going out. Ready to go hot?
Go hot.
How? Going hot.
Ah! Abracadabra!
Good God.
Are we actually, like, walking around in the dark with flashlights looking for a piece of lost equipment right now?
Hey, I found a rifle over
Is this
here,
really fucking
Chris. Is this
happening?
yours?
Greetings, this is dslyecxi, and today we're going to talk in detail about Arma Reforger. I'll be approaching this from the perspective of someone who's been in the loop on it for a few years now, and has been spending a lot of time thinking about what Reforger means for my own community, Shacktac, as well as the broader Arma community as a whole. I'm going to talk about and showcase various features, show off some multiplayer gameplay, and talk about the ramifications of it all and the future that Reforger is pointing us towards. I've been wanting to talk about Reforger for years now, and well, here we are.
As soon as he's here, we're just gonna use this turn.
Oh, look at those shadows.
That's so cool. Shadows is so. Yo.
Let's rip the band-aid off right away so we can move on to more interesting topics. Is this Arma 4? No, it's not. If you approach it from the perspective of expecting an Arma 3 level experience of feature parity, you're going to be disappointed. It's not able to offer all of what Arma 3 has at this stage. The easiest way to see that this isn't Arma 4 is to compare the logos. This is Reforger. This is Arma 4. As you can see, they're different things. Now that we've sorted that out, let's address the concern that Reforger being released on consoles is some big drama, as if the series going onto a console is going to spell the death of it. Given that Operation Flashpoint Elite came out on the Xbox many years ago, I'm thinking that ship sailed a long time ago and it's not really worth losing sleep over. There are valid things to take issue with. Reforger isn't always very deep, but to be fair, vanilla Arma hasn't always been the deepest either. Some of the gameplay related systems are still kinda shallow. The medical system is fairly basic, stamina isn't much of a factor, grenades are underwhelming, and we're missing features like weapon deployment and fire from vehicles. The AI is limited in what it's able to do and understand, and there are no jets, no helicopters, no tracked vehicles, no ships, just some wheeled vehicles. The inventory system is also a little clunky. If you look at Reforger as a total piece-for-piece replacement for Arma, it doesn't achieve that. I have a hard time imagining that communities will be able to switch entirely from Arma 3 to Reforger as it currently stands. You'd miss out on so much in the process. It can't yet scratch that same itch. So that all sounds pretty damning, right? Like, those are some big issues. Those are some major missing pieces. And that's not all of it either. There's a fair bit more that could be said.
As soon as we crest, we're going very aggressive into this.
The thing is, that's not what Reforger is to me. It's not a disappointment, not even close. I'm hyped for this and the future it promises. Playing it in multiplayer with Shacktac members has been an absolute joy. Now, allow me to use the rest of this video to explain and show why that is.
Clock's ticking, let's fucking do it.
Contact right. Close right.
Using contact right. Reforger's not Arma 4. It was never going to be Arma 4, but it is a step towards that, a big, tangible step for that matter. Bohemia is upfront about that. They know what they're delivering and where they want to go. This is a necessary step along that path, that road to Arma 4. It's a technological testbed, a focused package that allows Bohemia to give us, the Arma community, something to work with, something to learn and explore while Arma 4's production continues. Reforger is best understood by looking at what they're able to do, not those things that Arma 3 has and it doesn't. The absence of something like weapon deployment, for instance, isn't them saying that it's not a valuable feature. It's just them prioritizing what they could deliver for this rather specific project. This is software development after all, it's not wizardry. You can't do everything all at once, no matter how much you want to. Before we get further, I need to point something out here since I'm going to be using footage from multiplayer at various places in this video. There's currently a multiplayer issue where player movements are not interpolated correctly, which leads to a kind of stop-motion-esque jittery effect. This is something that's being worked on, but for now, any scene that has players moving around like this is the result of that jitter, and it'll be fixed in the future. So moving on. I talked about what Reforger isn't, so let's go over some of the many things that it is. Let's look at some of the features that are here, the things that have changed for the better since Arma 3. Arma's animation system has always been rather rough, to put it kindly, and it's limited the game's development since the early days. There are all kinds of features that haven't been present or were highly constrained by virtue of that archaic animation system. Reforger changes that. It's all new. You can see this showing up in a lot of different ways already.
Hey, is 2 pushed up to the first barn already?
We now have fluid stance. The control method for this is holding control and using your mouse wheel, and it works well. It's more granular than Arma 3's stance adjust, easier to use, and looks good. When you move in any given posture, you maintain that posture, which Arma 3 was lacking. A bit of polish added to this, like being able to do it from crouch and lower, would make it pretty much perfect. We also have a fluid movement speed system, controlled by the mouse wheel. Simply scrolling can take you from a very slow walk to a good jog, with much more granularity than the discrete modes of Arma 3. You don't need combat pace anymore, because combat pace is now determined by you, moving exactly how fast you want, simply by scrolling. This works when prone as well, allowing you to slow or fast crawl. Leaning is now fluid as well. Even with keyboard controls, you're able to do gradual leans and have them hold there. Mantling is now a thing. You can climb onto and over all sorts of obstacles. It's a bit gamey how easy it is, but that's a nitpick. The existence of the functionality itself is what matters. Arma 4 can change it, or we can mod it to taste. You can get pretty creative with this, such as climbing on the storage shelves in a warehouse to have the drop on anyone entering. The AI can mantle as well, but not in such an evil fashion, at least not yet. Also, fences with barbed wire prevent mantling, giving that a meaning that up until now hasn't been present in the series. Little things like climbing ladders sport much better animations. There's no more warping at the top of them, for instance. You can climb them at a normal or fast speed, and when descending a ladder, you can slide down it rapidly by holding shift. The weapons themselves look great, and their animations are nice and solid, much more so than in the past. The recoil system feels good across the variety of weapons that have been provided, much improved over prior games. Impact effects are good looking and have significantly better bullet hole effects than before, with explosions having a more realistic appearance and intensity to them. You also get an animation indication of when you're changing fire modes. A little touch, but nice. Tracers look interestingly different as well. It's not exactly how I'd portray them, but it's certainly not bad. We also now have different types of reloads. Dry, where you've completely exhausted your ammo and need to work the action or release the bolt after reloading. And tactical, where you just replace the magazine. Tactical is faster, adding some depth to gunplay. Oh, and you can now carry 2 types of weapons at once, not including your pistol, like this Russian Rambo wannabe. I think you heard us. It's okay, dude. You look awesome. I'm sure you're not compensating for anything. Weapons can have their own unique animation sets, such as the RPG-7, which you carry in a bit more of a believable manner. You can fire AT from prone as well, finally. The basics of attachments seem to be in, since you can take the scope off of the M14 through what looks kind of like a placeholder method. Your character also moves and tilts their head when going into sights, giving a clear indication to those nearby that they're sighting in. There's even a key for generating that stereotypical YouTube thumbnail style of your character quizzically investigating the strange thing that they're carrying. The way underbarrel grenade launchers work is a welcome improvement. V switches your fire mode, and holding V will switch you into your grenade launcher mode. These are comfortable to use with less view weirdness than Arma 3. Firing multiple rounds and adjusting onto a target is much more authentic and natural than in the past. Sight adjustment animations are there not just for the grenade launchers, but normal sights as well. The M16A2's notorious burst memory is even modeled, where stopping a 3-round burst early means that the next burst will only be the remainder of the shots from that interrupted burst. You can point as well. This is helpful for quickly assigning blame when an assault fails, or volunteering people for dangerous assignments, or leadership.
Goddamn.
Getting close to an obstacle will cause your weapon to tuck in. and if you're in the way of a door as it opens or closes, you'll stop it from moving until you get out of the way. This includes being able to block doors by staying up against them, though of course someone can still shoot through them. Picture-in-picture scopes are here, and they seem to have high fidelity. This kind of picture-in-picture tech has a lot of additional implications too, either to be explored by modders or by Arma 4 itself. You can also illuminate the reticle on scopes that support such functionality, adapting to the lighting conditions as needed. We have melee now. It's handy for smashing open windows, and I've had more than a few scenarios in Arma where being able to smash open an enemy's face when out of ammo would have saved the day. I'm really looking forward to having that scenario present itself again in this. One neat little detail is that smashing a window will allow rain to come in through it, like so. This is just via rifle butt at the moment, but hopefully we'll see bayonets in the future as well. Crew serve weapons have actual recoil now, and this is the first time in Arma that firing an M2 feels properly meaty. You'll also note that going into sights on these is a smooth transition down to the sights, and not an instant transition as in prior games. Reloading something like an M2 can be done by taking an ammo can into your inventory and then just loading it from there. For vehicle-mounted crew-serve weapons like the M2, you can see that there's proper inverse kinematics and animations, meaning that the character moves with the gun naturally, leading to neat behavior like this where the gunner's stepping around in the back of the Jeep as their aim changes. Oh, right, of course. The traditional Arma action menu, yeah, that's dead and buried. And good riddance. Actions show up associated with the item they correspond to, and for things that have multiple options, you can scroll wheel to select. When you're in a vehicle, you can operate different controls, the lights, hatches, and engine, by looking at the control itself and using it. You can switch seat to seat in a similar fashion. It's great. It took us 20 plus years to get here, but we're here, and that's awesome. There are also various environmental objects that have actions associated with them, like this lantern that you can turn on and off, toilets you can flush a la Duke Nukem, and even a piano that'll play a few notes when used. I'd imagine that we'll see a lot more usage of this kind of functionality going forward, especially for mods, such as for things like picking up and carrying ammo boxes or similar. The vehicles themselves are much higher fidelity than prior games, with much more convincing and realistic handling. Driving across terrain has a more visceral feel to it, and rolling is a real possibility, whereas Arma tended to make this pretty hard to achieve. Driving is far more interesting in Reforger than in Arma 3, and you have to pay attention to what you're doing, how fast you're driving, what the terrain is like, how your vehicle handles, else you're liable to cause a rollover, or a crash, or worse.
Oh my god! I looked away! Fuck you guys! I didn't see it happen.
Going off-road or through forest requires more care and attention, as it should.
Жатва всем позывным. Пришло подкрепление на точку Ёлка. Конец связи.
You can even do neat things like handbrake turns, or cause a vehicle to fishtail. It's honestly really neat. There's no doubt a racing mod is in the future for Forger. Your map, compass, and flashlight are all actual items you hold to use, meaning that you'll see others, even the AI, pull out the appropriate item when accessing it. The map's quality is higher than before, and the performance when viewing it seems better. You even get a flashlight style view when you're looking at it at night. The medical system is basic, but the functionality that's there, bleeding, bandaging yourself or others, and the gradual death that happens from not tending to your wounds, is a solid start. I look forward to seeing what dragging and carrying are like in this new animation system. The death animations right now seem to be some mixture between preset animations and blended into some kind of ragdoll. They aren't bad, but I hope they're improved going forward. I'd love to see them come closer to the kind of quality that Tarkov has for this, which is basically the pinnacle of death animations. And of course, one of the biggest things is the actual look of it all. Reforger is beautiful. It's a major step forward from Arma 3, and it checks some boxes that have significant gameplay ramifications, which to me is what really matters. First off, Evron itself looks fantastic. The level of environmental detail is like nothing we've had before in the series. There's loads of microterrain to give everything a more lifelike feel and add nuance to both movement and combat. Creeks and streams are in, with running water. You have wide open fields surrounded by dense forests, rocky hills, towns and villages, with every building being both enterable and sporting a highly detailed interior. The overall detail and quantity of objects of all types, be they buildings, vehicles, defensive structures, the art in general is high quality and diverse. Everything is an upgrade, everything looks great and makes for an exciting environment to fight in. The sandbags, camo netting, and other military defensive items are varied and blend in well with the terrain and lighting. Distant shadows are a thing. This has been one of my most wanted features for as long as I can remember, making terrain like forests much harder to assess from a distance, and having broad influence for all assets on the battlefield. Unfortunately, distant grass still isn't a feature, but one can hope that it'll become a priority going forward. Even the clouds cast shadows on the terrain as they float by. So speaking of blending in, let's take this scene for example. What do you see here? Take a moment to study it. No, there aren't like 15 snipers hidden here. Alright, let's see what we're looking at here. There are 3 machine gun nests in the near tree line alone. Here, here, and here. There's a truck partway into the woods over here, and further back, there's another machine gun nest covering the road. These would have stood out pretty clearly in Arma 3, yet Reforger's environment and lighting makes them easily blend in. The lighting is absurdly good. It's easy to imagine all kinds of crazy scenarios that can take advantage of it. Walking around a building with your flashlight out in the dark looks incredible, and we're now at the point where lights no longer bleed through walls. Searching the woods at night with flashlights is quite the mood. You can use a flashlight either in your offhand, like this, or you can attach it to your vest, like this. Having it on your vest results in it not being perfectly aligned forward, which I think is a cool touch and gives you a reason to have it in your hand when precision is needed. Or hopefully in the future to be able to have mounted weapon lights. You can even put a flashlight on the ground while turned on, which can be used for rather creative purposes.
Wow, that man has a big brain.
All fun and games till I need it later. The lighting at night is one of the most impressive aspects of the visuals. I mean, look at this stuff. This is awesome. I'm impressed that Infusion can pull this off so well, with so many light sources in a scene and so many shadows being cast. When you're standing in front of headlights, it's not just one shadow, you're getting 2 shadows, one from each light.
Yeah, you're right.
It's really impressive.
Hey, did we lose anyone? Don't think so.
Buildings that have darkened interiors will generally appear darker from outside and from further distances in a way that Arma never quite matched. Looking into the shadowy interior of a building from the outside feels authentic and foreboding, while looking back outside once you're in has the exterior overly bright until your eyes adapt. Dawn, dusk, and night are much more accurately represented than in Arma 3's gamified lighting, with lower light levels looking appropriately gloomy. The Purkinje effect, where colors shift in low light, is approximated well enough to be convincing. There are still things I'd like to see in this regard, but this is a strong showing already.
Careful, they're pushing through the bushes on the left as well. Roger!
The way headlights cause shadows to sprawl out around you as you drive is quite cool. Watching lights in general at night is incredibly atmospheric, whether they're from vehicles or infantry. Stormy weather and rain are incredibly atmospheric, with surfaces becoming wet, including your character's clothing and gear, and raindrops splashing against surfaces, including vehicles and troops. Roads will gradually saturate as it rains, and gradually dry once the rain stops. All of it looks fantastic, whatever the time of day happens to be. Tracers will also reflect in the water as they fly over, which is a side effect of the screen space reflection method used. While arguably not entirely realistic, it earns some major cool points. The soundscape is great. Ambient audio is fitting and varied, while distant gunfire sounds better than ever, changing form over distance or when inside of structures, with echoes being heard when firing in the open. The snap of passing bullets has an immediacy to it that Arma never quite matched. Movement, vehicles, weapon fire, the ambient noises of nature, everything sounds good. The music, though often subtle, seems nice as well.
I'm taking point. We're rolling out again.
Lead Vic's gonna stop in the town and secure. Lead Vic made it to Vernon, we're gonna stop.
And speaking of sound, there's much better VoIP in Reforger. There are aspects I want to see tweaked and refined in the future, but the basic functionality is currently much more interesting than what Arma 3 had. And it's a very effective Acre or TFAR Lite kind of system. There are radios with easily accessed tuning, radios have limited range, radio messages have authentic audio filters applied to them, and direct speaking is supported.
100 meters in the field right side. I was gonna try and push to the compound.
Oh shit, close!
Copy 2. Have you cut off to the right?
Push.
Control right, 20 meters.
It's a PTR on the
Good,
road.
close contact to our
Right
right.
at the compound.
Direct speaking also changes based upon occlusion between you and the speaker, as well as the environment you're in, such as a building, which sounds really cool.
Opening the store. Friendly. Friendly. We're good.
Hey, roll, clear
It's
field
fire.
with me.
Particle effects are significantly improved. There's more smoke and dust, with smoke even colliding with the environment to an extent. Explosions and fire both look great, with RPGs producing a small flash of flame and a large amount of smoke, dust, and debris. Vehicles typically don't immediately go catastrophic, but will instead explode after being on fire for a time. Bullet impacts are solid as well, with appropriate impact effects depending on the surface struck. Environmental destruction is enhanced from prior games in many respects, but not everything is as destructible as in the past, so far. Breaking down concrete walls or smashing through wooden fences is more satisfying, and all in all, it's a great start. The new Game Master interface is slick. Browsing and filtering assets is good, with plenty of options to help you find what you need quickly. Giving AI orders is good and well visualized. The way they've introduced the means to rapidly place compositions in pre-situated areas is a great idea. The whole thing looks like a solid, interesting starting point to evolve a Zeus-like capability into a new engine. Overall, the UI is done to a significantly better standard than Arma 3. Doing game mastering with Shacktack in our testing sessions has been a breeze. It's easy to add spawns, move spawns, spawn AI, add vehicles, supplies, throw hordes of AI against the players, whatever. The player's inventory is the one part of the UI that I think could definitely use some work. I've long wanted Arma to have more of a Tarkov-esque interface. In the past it was Brigade E5, which is essentially a precursor to that, in inventory at least. And the version in place right now doesn't really hit those goals. It's a bit over-compartmentalized, there's too much clicking around, too little awareness of what someone has without going layers into subcontainers. It's not terrible, but I'd like to see something different in the future. Now, as to the AI, there's a lot that needs to be done for them. Their functionality is pretty basic right now, but given that, let's look at areas where we can make direct comparisons. Basic movement and shooting. AI movement is very good. They're able to navigate everyone well, even when things get complicated, as they often are. In one scenario, we were defending an area that ended up with us being pushed onto a small peninsula with a lighthouse. Man, there are so many of them. The AI were able to aggressively advance on us in a manner that was far better than how Arma's behaved in the past. It was pretty crazy.
Dude, this is essentially overrun.
Yeah, we're fucked.
The AI is able to do some neat behaviors already. They regularly shoot on the move, strafe, or even back up when maneuvering, and crouch run when under fire or in combat. They'll dodge out of the way of vehicles driving at them, like you see here.
Another checkpoint.
If a grenade's thrown, they'll move away from it like this. I think this may also happen from explosions, but I'm not 100% on that. If shots land close to AI at a distance, they'll move away from the impact point. AI fire suppression or area fire as a normal thing now, and seem to be able to move through buildings well, though I haven't tested that extensively. Overall, the AI are much more capable with movement and are less robotic and clunky compared to Arma 3. They call out orders, which get occluded by objects and buildings, giving some good spatial awareness of what's happening when the fighting gets up close. They're also not dead-eye accurate, though this is one of those things that will require loads of tweaking to get feeling just right. I think right now they see through vegetation like it's not there, which is of course an issue, but it's certainly on the list of things to address. In short, the AI exhibit behaviors that prior games never had, and they're important, fundamental behaviors. Shooting on the move and understanding how to move more like a human are both huge steps forward for the series. Many of the tells that used to give a player away from an AI are muddied by these new behaviors, which is neat.
Facing forward, right team's gonna deal with the rear contact. Got it.
Yeah, hey, left team on me to the front.
When testing the AI in multiplayer, we were able to get a maximum count of AI, which is something like 100 or so, I haven't counted exactly. And we'd have them all engaged in combat with us with very minimal performance impact. The largest session we had during pre-release was around 40 players, with tons of AI, and our performance throughout seemed great from what I heard and observed myself. It was drastically different from how Arma would behave in the same situation. Now granted, these AI aren't doing as much from a logic standpoint yet, but I'm highly optimistic for the future as they get further developed. It'll be interesting to see how far this can be pushed in the future. Even with the AI being limited, the number of crazy situations we were able to game master was remarkable. The AI are extremely good at moving, and having a horde of them rushing your position has an intensity that's hard to get with Arma 3's AI. The modding accessibility to the AI behaviors, whether adjusting them or creating new ones entirely, looks like it's vastly better than before, so I'm looking forward not only to seeing what Bohemia does, but also what the community is able to cook up.
Gotta go.
Hold up.
Oh god, fucking go, just go outside Karma. Karma was
Why did you have an auto already?
Start the fucking car! Start the goddamn fucking car! Fuck! Come on, Karma! Fuck, go, god damn it!
Holy shit, dude, turn the fucking lights on!
Turn the goddamn lights on!
Bye, Karma!
Oh my god!
The main game mode, Conflict, is an update of the classic Capture the Island format, intended to be a team versus team experience with AI acting as a third party. This is a well-polished game mode so far. Tweaks and refinements post-launch will likely make it even nicer, but as it stands, I'm impressed at how well this updates the Capture the Island format into a new engine. Taking bases, moving troops around, building different resources like ammo or transportation depots, transporting supplies, there's a good variety of roles to take. And I'm looking forward to seeing this played at max player count, even if it's not exactly my cup of tea. Given the limited amount of playable content that Reforger currently has, what's going to give it longevity worth purchasing? I'm guessing we all know the answer to that. It's modding, of course. Modding is the lifeblood of Arma. The series wouldn't be around if not for the modding community, quite literally. The fact that Reforger has been released with a full modding tool suite, one which is properly modern and accessible, is a really big deal. Having this level of quality in tools that are so much better than what came before them, is a huge force multiplier for the modding community, particularly given that they're being accompanied by detailed documentation. The new scripting language, though still unfortunately proprietary, is much more modern in style and far faster than SQF ever could be. You can use these tools to make anything you want for Reforger in a way that is so much more accessible and capable than before. It's going to be wild to see what the community does with it. I haven't had the time to do a real deep dive into the different tools, but you can clearly see that this is not Arma 3's toolset. This is light years ahead. Making something like world editing as slick and usable as this means you're going to have more people making terrains, doing it with less aggravation, and having higher quality as a result. The same goes for every facet, whether that's particles, animations, AI behaviors, or anything else included. This is a top-notch toolset, especially compared to what came before. If you want a good comparison, think of the 2D editor from Arma 2, or Arma 3 early age, and compare it to Eden. The difference between those is comparable to the difference we're talking about here. Bohemia has also chosen to go with their own workshop system in order to make it work across PCs and consoles, and so far it looks like a pretty solid setup with some sample add-ons already available through it. The big thing to remember is that while we are losing content from prior Arma games as part of this engine transition, the scripts, for example, take time to rewrite into a new language, assuming of course that the language and underlying game have feature parity in the first place, which is a pretty big assumption right now. But remember that while we are losing content, we're not losing our lessons learned, we're not losing our ideas, we're being put in a position with fewer restraints on our creativity as we learn these new tools. If you thought Arma modding was good in the real virtual reality engine, what's going to happen in Infusion is going to blow you away. It is honestly the most exciting part of it all for me right now. Reforger is poised to be a much better modding platform than prior games were, and that's going to pay greater and greater dividends as time passes. I honestly don't think any of us can predict just how far the modding will go for it. This is a very different situation from how Arma modding worked in the past. Time will tell, of course, but like I said, I am incredibly hyped for this.
They're in our lines. They're in our lines.
So, where does this leave us now? Reforger isn't a one-for-one Arma 3 replacement, and it likely won't be until Arma 4 itself comes out, though it may get surprisingly far with the help of modding. There's a lot of cool stuff you can already do in it, and we've been having loads of fun experimenting with it already. What I'm looking forward to now is to see the modding community start working with the new tools. Whether that's in the form of add-ons, terrains, missions, or objects and vehicles, there's a ton that can be done with the assets and tools available. I'm expecting to see a lot of attempts at multiplayer missions that are PvP oriented, skirting around some of the current AI issues. So that's things like Battle Royale, King of the Hill, and stuff like that. I'm also hoping to see the community come up with clever ways to mitigate those AI issues or extend the behavior as we wait for Bohemia's take on it. I'm also expecting to see a lot of growing pains with the multiplayer aspects. That's a serious tradition that a new engine is all the more likely to exacerbate. Things have worked surprisingly well in pre-release. We've had a few crashes, but generally things are pretty stable. But there are still issues that can happen, and I'm sure we'll all find more of it as it goes into early access. Ultimately, I'm expecting to see a lot of interesting creativity and exploration, the beginning of something that's truly new. I've been waiting a long time for this, as I'm sure many of you have as well. I can't wait to see where this goes.
Oh my god. Oh god.
This is my rock.
Good news, I backed us into a corner.
Given that this is early access, there are likely still some things we'll see introduced going forward. If I were to suggest some very modest improvements for Reforger, a few of them would be as follows. First, I'd like some kind of solution for distant grass, as well as better distant terrain textures. The grass in particular is a huge deal. A solution to this would make a fundamental change to how the game plays, on par with how influential distant shadows are. I'd also like to see foliage that influences movement. Moving through brush, bushes, and trees should not only be noisy, it should also slow your movement down significantly. Try doing that for real. It's not fun. I'd also love it if terrain slope meant more, with stamina having more nuance, and surface type also playing a role. We're currently mountain goats, and we shouldn't be. Terrain should be an obstacle, as it is in reality. Longer term, I'd love to see below-ground trenches, foxholes, and other structures. They're such a core part of real war, it seems only right to have them show up properly in Arma. And of course we have the obvious things like performance, AI improvements, multiplayer improvements, and so forth. Not to mention the obvious feature evolutions for medical, weapons handling and deployment, and so on and so forth. The line separating Reforger goals and Arma 4 goals is a bit blurry right now, so it's hard to say what exactly we should expect over the course of this early access period, versus what we should expect in the future. We've all at one point or another likely wished that Arma went to a different engine, thinking that it'd solve problems that were long inherent in the real virtual reality engine. Well, this is the first part of that wish being granted. It's easy to imagine the future of this, but it's important to remember that this is the future, and it's something that has to be worked towards not just by Bohemian themselves in the form of Arma 4, but the broader community as well in the form of mods. What we have now is just the beginning of that journey, and it's rough in some places, it's shallow in others, but it's also quite beautiful and interesting in areas where they've had time to focus their efforts. There's plenty I've skipped here for the sake of brevity, and shortly after this video goes live, I'll be posting some longer form gameplay of Shaktak playing through Reforger in multiplayer, showing off many of the cool scenarios we found ourselves in. There are also a bunch of other Arma Regiment members who've posted their own takes. Check them out, or if you're convinced, just go ahead and grab Reforger and hop in to explore it yourself. For all the things that can be criticized about Reforger, there's so much more to love, and every reason to expect that the road to Arma 4 is going to be an interesting adventure for all of us. If you're new to the Arma series and want to know more, I've done a ton of training material for Arma 3, which you can find on my channel and my site, including video tutorials, as well as a massive written tactical guide, the official guide for Arma 3. If you like what I do and want to support me, I have a Patreon campaign as well. Links to all of these are in the description.
Are you looking at modern particle
Looking into the
effects?
fire, yes.
Hell daggone.
Maybe we should go kill some people.
This is dslyecxi, thanks for listening, and until next time, take care.
Still so worried with all the neat shit that everyone's gonna misinterpret. It's the new Arma game. Again, not realize this is just a foundation. Yeah, of course, no one would make irrational
I mean, no, certainly
like
not.
that.
But I think like it's gonna be relatively easy to sell it the way it is. You'll always have those people that are just gonna completely misunderstand it. But you know, especially once you've played it a little bit, you get the idea. Especially when you're, you know, being rushed by like 200 EI and realizing that you don't have any kind of extract available because it isn't developed yet.
What are boats? What are helicopters?
Sorry, no little bird yet.